Windows and Watchtowers by Thievery Corporation. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez.
Yes, it's been 10 years since the infamous Battle of Seattle. On November 30th, 1999, tens of thousands of activists from across the country and around the world prevented delegates from attending the global trade talks by forming a human chain around the Seattle Convention Center and shutting down the city's downtown. Police responded by firing tear gas and rubber bullets into the mostly peaceful crowd. The protest resulted in 600 arrests and in the eventual collapse of the talks, as well as the resignation of Seattle's police chief. It was a watershed moment for the movement against corporate globalization, and Democracy Now! Was there, broadcasting live.
Today, on this 10th anniversary of the historic protests in Seattle, we're joined by three guests on the phone. Norm Stamper, yes, the former police chief of Seattle and author of Breaking Rank, a top cop's expose of the dark side of American policing. We're also joined by longtime activist David Solnit. He's joining us from San Francisco, though he was in Seattle. He was one of the Direct Action Network organizers in Seattle 10 years ago and co-author with his sister Rebecca Solnit of the story of the Battle of Seattle, published by AK Press, out this week. Also, Ananda joins us, the North America coordinator for the Global Alliance for Incinerator Alternatives. He led a group of 4,000 Canadian workers to the protests in Seattle in 1999. Both David Solnit and Ananda are part of the Mobilization for Climate Justice Coalition that's organizing demonstrations and civil disobedience in 9 cities across the country today on this 10th anniversary. We welcome you all. David Solnit, let's begin with you. Describe 10 years ago.
10 years ago was amazing. We had several thousand people organized through the Direct Action Network who decided to shut down what we consider the most undemocratic institution on the planet, the WTO. Marching out 7 a.m. pre-dawn, setting up blockades around the city. And what was amazing is that within a few hours, the people of Seattle spontaneously joined us, so that very soon you were linking arms, keeping delegates out of the WTO and shutting it down with people who had never been involved in any organization before, and then backed up by the People's Assembly, by organized labor, breaking through the AFL's security folks and joining us. And so by the end of the afternoon, by midday, they had to cancel activities. And then the sad part was the Seattle police, by 10 a.m., opened fire with chemical weapons, tear gas, concussion grenades, armored vehicles. But people held tight, shutting it down from dawn to dusk. And at the same time, there were actions across the planet. The longshore workers had shut down every port up and down the West Coast.
And David Solnit, I remember very well, as if it was yesterday, being both out in the streets covering your protests and with Democracy Now!, with the New York Daily News, but then going back inside to the convention center as the delegates didn't know what to do. They were totally stunned because they couldn't get enough people inside even to get a meeting together. And so it dragged on for hours and hours with many of the delegates just standing around trying to figure out what to do. The impact of the surprise of this on both the governments of many countries in the world as well as the organizers of the WTO. Would you talk about that?
Well, the action itself wasn't a surprise. It was very public that thousands of people were going to try and nonviolently shut down the World Trade Organization. I think what the surprise to the world was, and we're in a very similar moment this week in the lead up to Copenhagen, is that Americans broke ranks from their government and actually stood up for democracy, for human rights, and for the things we need in our lives. And that was the surprise.
Ananda, talk about the organizing you did 10 years ago and the significance of the workers out on the streets in Seattle.
Well, Amy, 10 years ago was sort of a culmination of a decade of organizing. For us in Western Canada, it was really a culmination of various movements recognizing that the corporate rule over our forests and our forest-dependent communities was really leading to the disruption of community health and stability and I work mainly with the forest worker organizing, and there's a few hundred of us who joined the Canadian Labour Congress and other trade unionists from around North America on the streets. And for us, it was really a first realization, or a wide realization, that our cause to prevent corporations from robbing our forests and our communities was linked to the fight of peasants from India and fisher folk around the world who are trying to protect their natural resources, peasants trying to protect their seeds, and so it was really a coming together of various movements. For us, coming down to Seattle, we came down with a slogan of fighting the Global Free Logging Agreement, which is what we call the multilateral agreement on investments. That was a key component of the WTO, and we realized that our fight was linked to those of sort of communities, millions of people around the world, and it was perhaps my only regret is that we weren't able to sustain it back in on returning to Canada, but we did remain inspired by the fact that many of our allies around the world were eventually able to force the derailment of key provisions like the Agreement on Agriculture and well, really a lot of the major components of the Doha Round. So,
and
so
as
yes,
we move into this 10 years later, Ananda, as we move forward, the Copenhagen climate talks about to take place, how would you say the organizing from 10 years ago is translating into what's happening today?
Well, Amy, I think what we saw in Seattle was a culmination of a broad dialogue in civil society. I was part of an alliance called the Labour Environmental Alliance, and it was the first time forest workers and environmental groups and Indigenous activists got together to realize and recognize common cause. With the climate crisis, I think we've learned from a lot of our lessons in various resource-based fights and come forward to realize that the fights of communities here in North America fighting climate destructive and